The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the 10th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came forward to him and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And he said to them, "What is it you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Grant us to sit one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory." But Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" They replied, "We are able." Then Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink, you will drink, and with the baptism with which I was baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand and my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those whom it has been prepared." When the 10 heard this, they began to be angry with James and John. So Jesus called them and said to them, "You know that among the Gentiles, those whom they recognize as their rulers lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. But it is not so among you. But whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave to all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. My grandma is my hero. My grandma just turned 97 years old in August. She lives in a townhouse across the neighborhood from my parents. She now has a hard time walking around. She struggles with arthritis, has gone through a couple of bouts of cancer, and she has various other medical conditions that affect her heart and digestion. She has recently been losing her sight and her hearing, and it's really hard to communicate with her now. My grandma is my hero. She is a giver. She has lived her entire life serving other people. Even though she can't do a lot for other people in her old age, she still does everything that she can to make sure the people in her life feel loved. She makes sure that her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren know that they are cared for by sending birthday cards and Christmas and Easter cards. Whenever she has visitors, she will always do her best to clean up her house to the best of her abilities, even though she has a hard time with it now. And she tries to make people feel welcome and comfortable. Her entire life has been devoted to helping people with whatever they need. My grandma has had a wonderful life, but also a hard life. Her husband has been verbally abusive and manipulative towards her at times. And she has not had a lot of freedom to do what she wants, but more, she does things out of a necessity about things that need done. Even though she's been through all that, she still decides to dedicate her entire being to helping other people regularly. Because of her life of service, she is left with not much control over any decisions that she faces. I've seen people walk all over her and take advantage of her. I see my family fight over possessions that she has, but no one seems to be that interested in spending time with whatever time she has left. My grandma consistently dedicates her life to everyone around her and doesn't expect anything in return. It seems that my grandma has given up control of her life for her morals to dedicate herself to everyone around her. My grandma is my hero. But it has me question, why would anyone want to put that lifestyle upon themselves? Why would someone want to live a life of powerlessness and weakness? I love my routines. I like having the ability to jump in a car and drive across country at any moment if I needed to. I like being able to buy pork chops and chicken at the store that I could cook for myself to have a nice meal. Or I could go down the street to Panera Bread. I like having the freedom to make choices. But it makes me think about how having the ability to make these choices is a thing of privilege. I remember being in Mexico and only having options of 3 things that I could eat for breakfast. I could eat eggs, I could have cereal, or I could have a piece of bread. And that's all we had. Those were the options that I had to eat. And then I came back to my parents' house in Georgia, and there were so many options. I broke down crying. Did I want to eat one of 5 options of cereal, bagels, waffles, eggs, yogurt, or 6 options of fruit? I didn't know what to do. There were just too many decisions to make. And I sat down in my parents' kitchen just crying because my life had changed so much in a matter of a couple of weeks from when I was in Mexico. I had more options than I knew what to do with. Privilege. What if I were homeless and only had one place to lay my head? In a homeless shelter. Privilege. What if my work was taking advantage of me and I only had enough money to afford rice and beans this month? Privilege. What if I was stuck in an abusive relationship and I felt like there was no way to get out of that relationship without receiving more abuse, manipulation, and harassment? Privilege. We all have control over our lives and the freedom to make our own decisions with the options that we face. We don't like being told what we need to do, like having to put on a mask when we go into the church or the grocery store or anywhere else. We don't like the idea of having some of those rights taken away in the United States, and they might be disappearing. We don't like hearing that Southwest just canceled 2,000 flights that would give us more options to fly to different areas at cheaper cost from islip. We don't like that COVID vaccines might be mandated to continue going about our normal lives. It seems that we all like the privilege to control the areas of our lives and to have the power to make our own decisions. But I can tell you that this feeling of wanting to control things in our lives is all over our text today. In Mark, Jesus had just finished talking about his death and the tortures that he would face at the end of his life. Then James and John thought it would be a good time to ask Jesus for a favor. They wanted control over the ambiguity that they will face in their futures. James and John said, Jesus, we want you to do whatever we ask of you. Grant us to sit one at your right and one at your left. Oh, James and John, you still don't understand what Jesus is all about. So Jesus responds, whoever wishes to become great among you must be a slave to all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. Jesus came to be a servant of all people, not to control the world and have power to make decisions. Have you all ever thought about that? Like, why did God come to earth? God came to us in the world. He walked around in a very small area of Israel and was homeless. I'm sure he was hungry very often, and he did not always know where his next meal would come from. He walked around with some pretty hated people, tax collectors, prostitutes, and sick people. He was taken into custody by the leaders of the Jewish and the Roman orders, and he was tortured. Has anyone ever seen Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ? That movie was pretty graphic, and it gave me nightmares. It draws a really good picture of what Jesus' torture looked like. Jesus was whipped, beaten, spat on, and ridiculed. He was hung on a cross, which Sky History tells us is the 7th most brutal way to die in all of history. But if Jesus is God, why did he die in one of the worst ways to die in all of history? Why didn't God come and sit on a throne and rule in glory? If I were God, I would have taken over Israel and then invaded the rest of the world so that everyone would know that I am God. Then God would have control and power over everything, and everyone would know who God was. Oh, James and John, that's not how God works. That is not the God that our text tells us about this week. God isn't the God of power and control. God is the God of servanthood in sinners. We learn about what type of God we have in Isaiah. God has borne our infirmities and carried our diseases. God was wounded for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities, and bore the punishment that made us whole. God was oppressed, afflicted, and did not open God's mouth. God was crushed with pain and made an offering for sin. Our God is not the God of control and power. No. Our God is the Lamb who was led to slaughter in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. God is not the God of glory, privileges, and prosperity gospel, but the God of suffering and oppression and the underprivileged. So if you feel a lack of control in your life, if you feel overwhelmed with anxiety and depression, if you feel like you are tired of people telling you what you can and cannot do, you are most welcome here, and God sees your suffering. God sees how hard life is for you and your lack of control in life. God sees how you are struggling, and God loves you. God sees you. When James and John asked their questions about privileges that Jesus could grant them, Jesus didn't rebuke them. He asked them if they were able to drink the cup that Jesus can drink and be baptized with the baptism that Jesus was baptized with. Jesus brought them together in the love that they share in the sacraments because we are all able to be baptized in Jesus' baptism and share in Jesus' cup of blessing. We are all able to participate in Jesus' baptism and communion. Every time we remember our baptism and come forward for communion, we are reminded of God's grace and love, even when we are struggling through life. My grandma is my hero. Every time I think of her, I think of how much she has taken advantage of. I think of the life that she has lived and the abuse that she has taken. I think of the control that she has given up and how she has lost her senses, mobility, and power in life. but then I smile. And that smile is because I know that she has not suffered in vain, but she has lived out Jesus' life in this world. I know that because of the life that she has lived, that God sees her. God sees her and smiles on her because she has been a slave to all. Blessed be people like my grandma, because theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Amen.